If I stop, he'll find us, and he'll kill us this time. Nita Yazzie. The wind was already swallowing her footsteps when Nita Yazzie felt her knee buckle again. She didn't cry out. Crying wasted warmth. Crying made noise. Crying made him hear her. Instead, she pressed her lips tight and pulled harder on the cradle board dragging behind her. Her tiny hands, raw and split from the cold, clung to the leather strap as if it were the last thread holding her to life. Tomas whimpered under the furs. The sound was barely there, thin as a dying ember. She stole one glance back. His face was gray, his breath a trembling mist. She bent low and whispered through cracking teeth, "Stay awake, little bird. I'm here." Her breath blew sideways, snatched by the storm. There was no trail anymore, only the endless white swallowing the world around them. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose somewhere behind the wall of snow, but Nita couldn't see anything. Not the peaks, not the moon, not even her own feet. She adjusted the bundle on the cradleboard and dragged forward. Her moccasins were soaked through her toes, numb. The cold had climbed into her legs, turning them stiff wooden. She didn't know how long she'd been crawling. Hours, maybe days. Maybe it was only the same hour repeating itself over and over like a bad dream that refused to end. But she did know one thing. "If I stop," she whispered, "he'll find us, and he'll kill us this time." The words had lived inside her since the night her mother fell, pushed down the stone well behind their cabin. She hadn't screamed then either. Screaming only told him where she was. The snow thickened, her breath thinned. The whole world narrowed into two sounds, the scrape of wood behind her and the pounding in her ears. She stumbled again, fell to her hands, elbows trembling. It would be so easy to lie down. Just for a little while. Just close her eyes like Mama sometimes did when she was tired. But then she saw Tomas twitch, heard that tiny wet cough, and she pushed herself up. Another step, another pull, another inch of life. She didn't hear the horse at first. The storm devoured most sounds. But when a dark shape cut through the blur of white, high, tall, moving, her heart lurched into her throat. She scrambled backward, shielding Tomas with her body, fingers numb but ready to claw, kick, fight. The horse stopped a few yards away, steam rising from its flanks. Its rider leaned forward, brushing snow off his hat brim. He didn't speak right away, and that scared her more than if he'd shouted. Men who hurt children always started soft. But this man didn't come closer. He simply sat there on his horse-black coat, flapping in the gale, scanning the storm, as if trying to understand what kind of world leaves a girl this small alone in it. "Child," he finally said. His voice was rough, low, half swallowed by wind. "You hurt." Nita shook her head hard. Her braids slapped against her cheeks. Hurt children got taken. Hurt children disappeared. The man eased down from the saddle. He didn't stomp toward her. He didn't grab. He moved slow, careful, like approaching a skittish colt. "My name's Santiago," he said. "Santiago Valdez. I've got a warm house close by. Fire, blankets, food. You bring your brother and come with me, or neither of you will last the night." Warm, fire, blankets. The words sounded like stories Mama used to tell. They didn't feel real anymore. Nita shook her head again. "No men," she rasped. "No more." Santiago exhaled slowly. Something inside that breath, something tired and old, made her pause. He took off one glove and held his hand toward her palm up. "You got my word. No one's hurting you under my roof." Promises were cheap. She had learned that fast. But the storm was killing them, and Tomas had stopped making sound. She let her eyes drop for one heartbeat. Just one. And in that heartbeat she saw Santiago's hand tremble, not with anger, not impatience, but something else. Something like fear, worry for her. She had never seen a grown man's hand shake for her. Her resolve cracked. Just a little. Enough. Help him first, she whispered, stepping aside so he could reach Tomas. He's cold. He's so cold. Santiago didn't hesitate. He wrapped Tomas inside his coat, pressing the infant against his chest. Then he scooped Nita up light, as wind-blown sage, and swung her onto the saddle before settling behind her. She stiffened, expecting harsh hands, a barked order, a jolt of pain. But his arms only braced her gently, steadying her small body against the sway of the mare. "Stay awake, little one," he said. "You fall asleep out here, you won't wake up." She clung to the saddle horn and nodded. The world blurred as the horse lurched forward. Snow slapped her face. Wind clawed her eyes. But for the first time that night, something warm pressed against her back, Santiago's coat, thick and smelling faintly of coffee and wood smoke. She realized she could breathe again. Not well, not easily, but enough. As they rode through the storm, Nita felt the carved stick inside her coat jab her ribs with each step. She clutched it tighter. Santiago noticed the movement. "That yours?" he asked. She hesitated. Words felt dangerous. But Mama had said the stick was the truth, and truth was the only thing that could save them. "It's our water," she whispered. "Agua clara. My papa's. My grandpapa's. He wants it. The pale-eyed snake wants it." Santiago's jaw tightened. Raul Valdez, his grandfather, had once filed claims with a man named Yazzie. He remembered the stories, the handshakes, the partnership. He also remembered how those partnerships always seemed to disappear once the railroad pushed through. "We'll talk when you're warm," he said quietly. By the time they reached the ranch, Nita could barely hold her head up. Lights glowed through the snow, soft golden like candles in a church window. She had not seen such light since Mama died. Soledad burst from the doorway the moment Santiago dismounted. "Santo cielo, what have you done to yourself, viejo?" She froze when she saw Nita in his arms. "A child. In this storm, bring her in. And the baby, ay Dios." Inside, heat slammed into Nita's skin so fast it hurt. She gasped. Her fingers began to tingle, sharp, fiery pain. Santiago knelt and set her in front of the hearth. Soledad wrapped her in wool, fussing the way Mama used to. Santiago opened his coat and revealed Tomas limp as a rag, barely breathing. Soledad's face twisted. "I'll prepare the warming blankets. You call Dr. Chavez." "Now, Santiago." He nodded, already shrugging into his snow-crusted coat. Nita reached out and grabbed the hem of his sleeve. Her hand shook. Her voice was a whisper swallowed by crackling fire. "Don't tell him we're here. Tell who the pale-eyed snake," she breathed. "He wears the law on his chest, but the devil sits behind his teeth." Santiago felt something cold, colder than any storm, crawl down his spine. "Rest," he told her. "You're safe tonight." But he didn't believe it. Not yet. He stepped back into the storm to fetch the doctor, unaware that men were already following the fading hoofprints he had left in the snow. Men with pale eyes. Men with orders. And the storm had only just begun. The fire cracked loud as a whip as Soledad pressed another log into the hearth. Nita sat bundled in thick wool, her legs stretched out stiff in front of her, the skin beneath her knees blistered with frostbite. She didn't speak. Not yet. She stared at the flames like they were some ancient spirit, deciding whether to keep her or let her go. The cradleboard leaned nearby, propped against the wall, blankets folded back. Tomas had been stripped, wrapped in warm sheepskin, and laid beside a brick heated in the stove. His cheeks were still pale, his breath shallow, but he was breathing. That alone made Soledad whisper prayers of thanks under her breath as she dabbed warm water across his tiny hands. The door banged open. Santiago stepped in, snow shaking loose from his coat. He didn't look up at the fire. He looked straight at Nita. "Doctor's on his way." Nita nodded once, barely, then shifted her weight and pulled something from under the thick blanket covering her chest. A stick, old, smooth from use, about 2 feet long. Along one side ran a careful line of notches, tiny numbers carved beside each one, precise, measured. There were stains near the top, red like old blood. Santiago took a step closer. Nita didn't flinch, but she didn't hold it out either. He crouched down in front of her, his knees popping loud in the quiet. "What's that?" he asked gently. Nita stared at it, then at him. Her voice, when it came, was little more than smoke. "My papa called it the stick that holds the water. He said it's older than me, older than him. It belonged to my grandpapa. His name was Yazzie." Santiago's eyes narrowed. The name hit somewhere deep. "My abuelo was Raúl Valdez," he said. "Used to work with a Yazzie. Back when this land didn't have fences and nobody trusted a handshake to last longer than a sunrise." Nita looked down at the stick. "My mama said they shared the water. Agua clara. Measured it every spring. The stick shows who used what and when. The first marks are from 1861. Santiago reached out slow, like approaching a wild foal. "Can I see it?" She hesitated, then nodded. He held it in both hands, thumbs running along the worn groove where decades of fingers had pressed. The notches were perfectly spaced. The dates were carved with a small knife, maybe the same one all these years. He remembered watching his grandfather do this exact thing in the early mornings before planting. Santiago hadn't seen a stick like this since he was 15. "This isn't just a stick, Santiago. It's a map of a war they thought was buried." The voice behind him was gravelly calm. Dr. Elias Chavez stood just inside the door, brushing snow off his shoulders. His black leather bag dangled in one hand. His eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, didn't blink once as they fixed on the carved wood in Santiago's hands. "They used to call them sticks of truth," Chavez continued, crossing the room, "before the lawyers got involved. This one looks real." "It is," Nita said. Her voice had firmed just barely. "Mama made me memorize all the names, all the dates. She said if we ever lost the paper, the stick would prove the claim. She said some things were older than the law. Water is one of them." Dr. Chavez knelt beside Tomas, now stirring slightly. He began checking this baby's pulse, his skin, his lungs. His hands were steady, practiced. "He'll live," he said after a moment. "You brought him out just in time." Nita didn't reply. She stared down at the stick. "What about her?" Santiago asked. Chavez glanced over. Mild frostbite. Nothing black, nothing dead. A few burns on her arms. Older ones. Some look like cigarette ends. I've seen 'em before. War camps. Slavery patrols. Men who like pain." Santiago looked at Nita again. She kept her eyes on the fire now. "She says someone's after them," he muttered. "A man with pale eyes. Railroad man, maybe." Chavez nodded. "There's a name floating around Santa Fe. Caleb Trask, surveyor. Claims to be a lawyer, working for the railway expansion. Real piece of work. Always comes into a place with a stack of paper and walks out with land that didn't used to be his. Santiago looked at the stick. He wants this. No, Nita said. Her voice was shaking now. He wants what it means. The land, the water, the gold under it. He said it's worth more than people. Soledad crossed herself in the background. Chavez reached into his bag and pulled out a rolled-up map, unfurled it across the table. This is the current line, he said, tapping the ink trail. They've been surveying a detour through Agua Clara Valley. Cuts travel time by a full day. But there's one thing in the way. Santiago's eyes followed the map, then landed on a square with faint ink. Joint claim, he muttered. Valdez and Yazzie Chavez said, filed 1861. Still valid unless both lines are dead, or the evidence disappears. Everyone turned toward Nita. I didn't let him burn it, she said. I ran. Where's your mother? Chavez asked gently. In the well. Santiago closed his eyes. Chavez laid a hand on the table. Someone needs to know about this. No. Nita's voice was sharp now, full of sudden fear. He wears the law, sheriff's badge, but it's all lies. Mama said they'd take us if we talked. Mama said only the right person could be trusted. Chavez looked at Santiago. You're the right person, he asked. Santiago didn't answer. The stick lay between them. The wind outside howled again. The fire popped, sending sparks toward the chimney. Tomas stirred beside the stove, letting out a small, hopeful cry. Nita looked up, eyes clear and dark. Don't let him take the stick. It proves everything. Santiago nodded slowly. Then we keep it safe. From outside came the distant sound of horses. Hooves. Not just one. Several. Soledad rushed to the window. Riders. Heading toward the pasture. Santiago stood. They found us. Nita pulled the blanket tight around herself and whispered one more time. If I stop, he'll find us. So we don't stop. Santiago looked at the doctor. How long can you stay? Chavez picked up his bag and opened the door. Long enough to see this war get started again. And then the night held its breath. Soledad. Romero was already lighting the second lantern when the knock came. Not the kind of knock a neighbor made, no pause, no courtesy, just a blunt, deliberate pounding that echoed through the frame of the house like a warning. Santiago stood at the table, hand resting on the water stick, eyes still fixed on the trail map Dr. Chavez had left behind. He didn't flinch. Two riders, Soledad said, peeking through the curtains. One of 'em's got a silver star on his coat. Santiago let out a slow breath. Sheriff Mendez. Soledad nodded. And the other one, he doesn't belong here. I can tell. The door shook again. Louder this time. I'll handle it. Santiago opened the door before the next knock landed. Cold wind rushed in around the frame along with the scent of horses and oilskin. Sheriff Ernesto Mendez stood tall, broad-shouldered, hat-brim, dripping from melted snow. Behind him sat a man with pale eyes and a long black coat dusted white with flurries. He didn't dismount. Evening, Mendez said, flashing his badge like a priest showing a crucifix. We heard there's a child here in need of help. Santiago didn't answer. Just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. The sheriff cleared his throat. We received a telegram this morning. A Mr. Caleb Trask claims legal guardianship over a child named Nita Yazzie. He's got documents filed in Santa Fe. Will's affidavits. Says her mother passed and left the child in his care. Still, Santiago said nothing. The man on horseback finally spoke. If she's here, Mr. Valdez, you're interfering with a legal transfer of custody. His voice was dry, soft but sharp, like paper cutting skin. She's asleep, Santiago said at last, and cold, and scared half to death. She's not going anywhere tonight. Trask dismounted, boots crunching in the snow. He moved like someone who didn't worry about being shot. The kind of man who trusted signatures more than guns. She's in danger, he said, running around in the snow like that. Her mother, God rest her, was unstable. The girl needs care. A future. Unstable, Santiago echoed. She fell down a well, didn't she? Trask's face tightened for just a second. A tragedy, he said. But not your concern. Santiago stepped forward, closing the gap between them. Everything on this land is my concern. Behind him, inside the warm house, Nita crouched low behind the armchair, clutching Tomas tight against her chest. Soledad placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. Nita whispered, "That's him. He wears the law on his chest, but the devil in his eyes." Soledad nodded once. "I know. I've seen men like that before." Outside, Mendez shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Santiago, you know I don't want trouble here. Just let the girl come out. Let her talk to Trask. Let's keep this civil." Santiago's eyes burned into Trask. "You want civil, you show me proof. You show me the girl's handprint on those papers. You show me a judge that ain't bought and blind. Otherwise, you can ride your lies back down the mountain." Trask smiled, thin and cruel. "You're harboring a fugitive minor. That makes you a criminal. You try to come through that door," Santiago said, "and you'll be something else entirely." The standoff sat between them like a loaded gun. Then, mercifully, the sheriff stepped back. "We'll be back," he said, "with more men, and the proper paperwork." Santiago didn't move. "Bring hell with you if you like, but don't expect it to leave here clean." They rode off in silence, Trask never once looking back. When the hoofbeats vanished into the woods, Santiago shut the door and bolted it. The room seemed smaller now, warmer but heavier. Dr. Chavez sat near the fire, sharpening a pencil and studying the map again. "That man's not just after water," he said. "He wants the land, all of it. He's got papers ready to rewrite this whole valley." "He won't stop," Soledad added, "not after being told no. You saw how he looked at her. That wasn't a man who forgets." Santiago turned to Nita, who had crawled forward, Tomas still tucked under her arms like something sacred. "I didn't tell him anything," she said quickly. "I know," Santiago replied. "You did good." She hesitated, then pulled the stick out again, offering it back to him. "I think he wants this more than he wants me." He took it carefully, turned it over once more in his hands. This time he noticed a small groove on the bottom edge, worn but deliberate. A kind of symbol. It wasn't a letter or number. It was a shape. A circle broken by 3 lines. "I've seen this," he murmured. Chavez looked up, where my grandfather carved it on the gate to the old spring house, near the arroyo. Chavez leaned in. "Then that's the location of the original spring. If the water starts there, the claim holds everything downstream." Santiago nodded. "Including the land Trask wants for his rail spur." Soledad crossed her arms. "You think he knows? He knows enough," Santiago replied. "And he's not riding alone tomorrow. He's coming back with teeth." Nita sat silently, watching the grown-ups speak like generals in a war room. But the fear in her eyes didn't fade. It wasn't the storm outside that scared her. It was the memory behind her eyes. the sound of her mother screaming, the echo of boots on wood, the cold splash of well water. "Maybe we should run," she said softly. "No," Soledad answered. "We don't run from men like him." Santiago looked toward the door, toward the darkness beyond. "We don't run," he said almost to himself, "but we sure as hell prepare." He moved to the cabinet near the kitchen and opened it, revealing an old double-barrel shotgun and a box of shells wrapped in cloth. He placed them on the table. "We'll need help," he added. "People who don't scare easy, people who know what this fight means." Chavez stood. "Jonas Black Elk's camp is still north of here, up near the mesa. He owes you a debt." Santiago nodded. "Send word." He turned to Soledad. "Have Esperanza been seen lately?" She blinked. "Your daughter." "She's not my daughter anymore," he said quietly. "She made that choice. Last I heard, she was in Taos, working with smugglers, maybe rebels. Send word anyway." Dr. Chavez grabbed his coat and hat. "I'll ride back before dawn. Bring supplies and maybe a few old friends with good aim." Santiago picked up the stick again and held it to the firelight. The notches glowed faintly like memory burned into wood. "We hold this line," he said, "no matter what." The wind howled louder, rattling the shutters. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried, and Nita, sitting by the fire, whispered to her brother, "We're not ghosts yet." In the distance, lights flickered along the ridge lanterns, moving on horseback. Scouts. The next attack had already begun. Nita didn't sleep that night. Even as the fire softened and the wind outside turned to nothing more than a whisper dragging across the walls, she sat wide awake in the chair by the hearth, arms wrapped around Tomas. His chest rose and fell steadily now, his skin warm from the stove's heat, but her grip didn't loosen. She stared into the low flames, hollow-eyed, like she could see something inside them no one else could. Santiago noticed. He was used to silence, he preferred it, but hers had weight. It wasn't the silence of a quiet child. It was the silence of someone carrying something too big for her size, too dark for her years. He knelt beside her just as the first hint of gray light slipped through the frosted windows. "You hungry?" She shook her head. "You should eat. Helps you think better when you talk." Her lips twitched, almost like a smile. Almost. "I think better when I'm scared," she said. That stopped him for a second. Then she shifted her weight gently, laid Tomas down in a basket lined with blankets, and pulled her legs up into the chair. Her eyes didn't leave the flames. "I didn't scream," she said. "Not when he shoved Mama. Not when she hit the rocks. Not when the water stopped making bubbles." Santiago didn't interrupt. "I didn't scream because if I did, he'd kill Tomas too." The room went still. Only the crackle of the fire moved. Santiago sat on the floor beside her, one arm resting on his knee. He waited. "He came 2 weeks ago," she said, "with papers and boots and a face that didn't move. Said he was helping Mama fix the claim. Said the railroad wanted to buy our land. Mama said no. She said the water wasn't for sale." He laughed like that was funny. Her hands gripped the blanket tighter. "He stayed overnight. Mama didn't want him to, but he said it wasn't safe to travel. Said there were bandits out past the ridge. But he just wanted time to look through Papa's things." She caught him with the water stick and the claim journal. She made him leave. Nita blinked slowly. That night, the fence was cut. Chickens gone. Mama was scared. She sent me to sleep in the root cellar, told me not to come out till sunrise. Her voice thinned like it was disappearing behind her. I heard her yelling. Then silence. When I came out, she wasn't in the house. I found her slipper by the well. The lid was open. Santiago reached across, set his rough hand over hers. Her fingers twitched but didn't pull away. He was still there, she nodded. He said Mama slipped. He said she was drunk. Mama didn't drink. Ever. What did you do? I nodded. Nita whispered. I pretended to believe him. Then I waited for night. I took the stick-wrapped Tomas and ran. She turned her head, finally looking Santiago in the eye. He didn't follow right away. I think he thought I'd die in the snow. He underestimated you. No, she said. He knew I might make it. That's why he's angry. From the far end of the room, Dr. Chavez leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. She's telling the same story she told me last night. No drift. No hesitation. That's memory, not imagination. Santiago stood. That's murder. Soledad walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. And motive. If the stick proves her family's rights to the water, then Trask has every reason to erase them. Santiago glanced at Nita again. Did your mama keep anything else, anything that had names? Signatures, Nita thought for a moment, then nodded. She hid letters, real papers. She said they were safer at the old church than at home. Which church? The white one in the canyon, near the broken cross. Soledad inhaled sharply. That place has been abandoned for 20 years. She said no one would look there, Nita said. It's under the altar. Dr. Chavez turned to Santiago. If we get those letters, and they match the stick, we've got physical proof of original water ownership, predating Trask's survey claims. That's gold in court. If we live long enough to present it, Santiago muttered. Nita stood up slowly. Let me go, I know where it is. Santiago shook his head. Not a chance, I can be quiet. You've done enough. She clenched her fists. That's not true. I haven't done anything. Mama said the water isn't just water. She said it was the last thing they couldn't take from us. Not the land, not the house, not even Papa. But the water. Her voice cracked. The water belongs to our name. There was a silence that followed one that carried through the floorboards. Santiago rubbed a hand over his jaw. Someone's got to go. Someone who knows how to disappear in the woods. Soledad looked toward him. Esperanza. Chavez raised an eyebrow. You think she'd come? She will if I ask. You haven't spoken in years. I don't need to. I still remember where she hides her mail drops. Soledad stepped forward. Even if she comes, getting in and out of that canyon with Trask's men sniffing around won't be easy. She'll manage, Santiago said. She always did. Chavez pulled on his coat. I'll ride down into Mora. Maybe I can find someone who still honors a badge, or at least a bribe. Santiago turned to Nita. You did right telling us. She sat back down beside Tomas, the blankets around him, rustling gently as he stirred in his sleep. I waited too long, she whispered. I should have screamed. No, Santiago said softly. You survived. That was louder than anything you could have shouted. A knock at the back door made them all freeze. Santiago moved slowly, one hand reaching for the rifle by the stove. He opened it a crack. A figure stood in the pre-dawn shadow, wrapped in a faded coat, one braid slung across her shoulder like a coiled rope. Esperanza Valdez. She lifted her chin, eyes unreadable. You sent for me, Santiago stepped aside. Come in, we've got a war to win. Esperanza's eyes flicked toward the little girl by the fire. She looked for a moment like she saw herself 20 years ago, smaller, hungrier, but just as stubborn. She, the one with the stick, Nita raised it. Esperanza nodded once. All right then. Tell me where I need to go. Santiago closed the door behind her. The wind outside was dying down, but the air still held the scent of snow and something else, blood, waiting to dry. The fire snapped loud behind them like the last piece breaking. The morning sun rose pale and distant, casting long silver light across the frozen pasture. Everything was quiet, too quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. Santiago stood on the porch, a cup of bitter coffee steaming in his hand, watching frost melt in slow drips from the eaves. Behind him, the house had changed. The mood had shifted. Soledad was checking rifles. Chavez was boiling bandages and herbs. Esperanza paced the room like a caged mountain lion, her eyes scanning every window, every shadow. She hadn't spoken much since she arrived, but her presence filled the place. Taller than Santiago, remembered wiry, strong, sun-cut across the cheekbone and wearing the same rawhide boots she'd stolen from him as a teenager. Her coat was patched, her braid knotted with beads from distant towns, but her movements smooth, sharp, told him she hadn't softened in the years since she left. Fences are too close to the tree line, she said behind him now. If they've got shooters, they'll pick us off before we even hear the shots. I know, Santiago replied. Then why haven't you moved them? I only got 2 good men on hand. And neither of them is here yet. She sipped from a tin mug leaning against the porch rail. You called Jonas riding in tonight, maybe sooner. Esperanza scanned the horizon. You better hope he brings more than a rifle. Inside, Nita stood on a stool by the window, peeking over the sill with wide eyes. Tomas slept behind her in the bassinet. Soledad handed her a small knife. You keep that close. If anyone but us comes through that door, you don't hesitate. Nita looked at the blade. It was old, the handle worn smooth. She held it with both hands, testing the weight. I've never cut anything before, she said. Soledad crouched beside her. Then pray you never have to. But if it comes to it, you fight. You understand me? Nita nodded. I won't run this time. Outside, Santiago and Esperanza walked the perimeter, pointing out weak spots in the fences, placing small strips of torn cloth as silent markers. The snow crunched beneath their boots. I heard about what you did in Durango, he said, without looking at her. Esperanza didn't answer at first. Then they started it. I'm not judging. She paused. Yeah, you are. He turned to face her. You ever think about what you left behind? Her jaw flexed. Every damn day. You could have written. And say what? Sorry, I ran off to shoot at men and never came back. Santiago sighed. You didn't have to stay gone forever. Esperanza looked past him toward the house. I figured you stopped waiting. I never stopped. She kicked at the snow. I guess that makes both of us fools. Before he could respond, they both turned toward the distant hills. A whistle floated through the air, 3 quick notes rising and falling like a hawk's cry. Santiago's face lifted. He's here. Minutes later, Jonas Black Elk rode in with 2 others, Leandro, a half-crow trapper with 1 eye, and Father Duval, the old priest from San Felipe, who rode with a Bible and a shotgun. Jonas slid off his horse, embracing Santiago with a heavy clap on the back. You called, I came. Simple as that. Santiago smiled. Still wearing that same coat. Still fits. He turned to Esperanza. Didn't expect to see you again. Didn't expect to come back. Jonas nodded. Funny how war finds us whether we ask for it or not. Inside, Chavez spread the map across the table again. He pointed at the church in the canyon, circling it with his thumb. Esperanza rides tonight. She'll go through the south ravine, cross the dry riverbed, and come in through the cellar. Father Duval squinted. The canyon's crawling with riders. Best she goes alone. She knows, Santiago said. Esperanza was already packing water-dried meat, a small pistol strapped beneath her coat, a folded note from Nita tucked into her inside pocket. In the corner, Nita approached her slowly. There's a rock under the altar, she said. A flat one with white scratches. The box is behind it. Mama said it was sealed with wax. Esperanza crouched to her level. I'll bring it back. I promise. What if they catch you? Esperanza's smile was small and sharp. They'll have to catch me first. She rose, tipped her hat at Santiago, and slipped out into the cold again. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned violet, Santiago stood in the barn, tightening the straps on an old saddle. Jonas watched him from across the stall. You're getting ready for something. They'll come before dawn, Santiago said. I can feel it. Jonas leaned on the gate. And you think you'll hold them off with 5 people? I don't plan on giving them the house. You planning on dying here? Santiago cinched the saddle tighter. If I fall again, I won't get back up, so I won't fall. Jonas gave him a long look. You always talk in riddles only when I'm scared. Jonas smiled faintly. Good. Means you're still thinking. As night crept in, they lit no lamps. The house went dark except for the fireplace. Outside, Father Duval dug shallow trenches beneath the windows. Leandro hung broken glass along the fence line, and Jonas paced to the edge of the woods like a wolf waiting for dawn. Inside, Soledad laid Tomas down in a drawer lined with cotton and tucked a revolver under her pillow. Chavez sipped whiskey in the kitchen, staring at a letter he never opened. And Nita sat by the fire, the water stick across her knees like a sword. The wind howled softly through the chimney. A tree branch scratched against the shutters. Santiago looked at each face in the room one by one. When this starts, he said, we don't shoot to warn. We shoot to end it. Jonas nodded. You don't shoot unless they cross the bloodline. What if they do? Nita asked quietly. Santiago looked at her, voice calm. Then we hold the line, no matter what. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, a lantern bobbed through the dark. Then another, and another. They were coming, and Esperanza hadn't come back yet. The first shot came just before dawn, sharp, deliberate, echoing across the trees like a cracking bone. It wasn't a warning. It was a start. Santiago didn't flinch. He was already at the window, crouched low, shotgun across his knees. The air in the room had gone still the way it does before thunder. Behind him, Soledad held Tomas close, her other hand on Nita's shoulder. Jonas stood at the front door, revolver in hand, his face calm but unreadable. 3 riders to the north, Leandro called from the loft. 2 more flanking the orchard. They're spreading wide. They're testing us, Jonas muttered, seeing if we scare easy. We don't, Santiago said. Nita tightened her grip on the knife Soledad had given her. She didn't blink. In the trees, movement flickered, shadows slipping between trunks, low voices, the jingle of tack. Then another shot rang out. It hit the porch beam with a loud crack, sending a splinter flying past Santiago's ear. Told you, he said dryly. No warning shots. He raised the shotgun and fired once. The echo shattered the morning quiet, and a scream followed. Someone had been hit. Jonas grunted. That'll teach them to peek. Chavez crouched beside the fireplace, a rifle laid across a crate. How long you think they'll circle before rushing us? Santiago didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew this wasn't a siege. It was a hunt. Trask's men didn't want surrender, they wanted erasure, and they were used to getting it. Outside, the wind picked up scattering leaves and ash from the early fires. The ranch had gone from a home to a fortress overnight. Every window had been reinforced, every exit planned. They weren't just defending themselves. They were defending history, proof truth, and 2 children who had no one else. Another shot rang out closer this time, then 3 in a row from the southern tree line. They're trying to draw us out, Jonas said. Make us chase ghosts. We stay put, Santiago growled, until they get stupid. Footsteps thudded above. Leandro appeared in the stairwell, breathing hard. Someone's in the barn. Jonas turned fast. They cut through the back fence. Santiago didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and rifle. Jonas with me. Soledad stepped in front of him. You go out there, they'll flank the house. He looked her in the eye. And if we don't, they'll burn the horses. We lose the horses, we lose everything. She held his gaze, then stepped aside. Jonas and Santiago slipped out the side door, moving low beneath the frost-hardened fence line. Smoke curled from the barn, just a wisp. Not a fire. Yet. They circled, wide rifles up. At the far end of the barn, a figure crouched beside the haystack, fumbling with a lantern. Santiago raised his rifle. Drop it. The figure froze, then stood slowly, hands raised. It was a boy, barely 17. Pale eyes, Trask's men. Don't shoot, the kid stammered. I didn't sign up for this. Jonas approached, grabbed the lantern, and kicked over the kerosene can. You were about to light it. He said if I didn't help, he'd cut my pay and throw me off the rail crew. Santiago narrowed his eyes. What's your name, Micah? You from New Mexico, number Kansas. Then go back to Kansas. Jonas shoved him hard toward the trees. Run, and tell your friends the next one who touches fire dies with it. Micah didn't argue. He vanished into the woods. Back at the house, Soledad stood with the children near the hearth. Nita turned her face toward the door every few seconds. She's still not back, she whispered. Esperanza's still not back. She'll come, Soledad said, though her voice had a thread of doubt. Nita's hands trembled. What if they caught her? She's not the kind that gets caught. A burst of gunfire erupted outside. 5 or 6 shots in quick succession, too fast to count. Chavez moved to the window. They're making a push. Which side? East fence. Jonas and Santiago had just returned, breath-steaming clothes soaked in sweat and snow. Then that's where we stand, Santiago said. They moved fast out the door around the shed, up to the low rise just before the eastern slope. They're crouched in the brush. 4 riders waited behind a log barrier. They had rifles. One wore a deputy's badge, though his coat looked more like a hired gun's than an officer's. Santiago signaled to Jonas. Jonas nodded. Together they rose from behind the rocks and opened fire. 2 men dropped before the others could aim. The rest scattered. Jonas reloaded. That's twice we've cut them. Santiago scanned the horizon. And they're still coming. A scream broke the quiet. Not from outside. From inside. Santiago's blood turned to ice. He sprinted back to the house boots, pounding the frozen dirt. He slammed through the door and found Soledad standing over a body on the floor. A man, Trask's scout, was bleeding from the gut. A long kitchen knife jutted from his coat. Nita stood behind him, frozen in place, her hands dripping red. I thought he was you, she whispered. He had your coat. He smiled like you do. Santiago dropped to his knees. Nita, he got inside. He was by the back door. Said he was coming to help. But he grabbed Tomas. I had to. I just did it. Her eyes didn't look like a child's anymore. Santiago reached for her, but she stepped back. I didn't even feel it go in, she said. I just knew I couldn't lose him too. The room fell silent. Then Soledad spoke. You protected your brother. You did what you had to. I think I'm not a little girl anymore, Nita whispered. Santiago swallowed hard. No, you're not. Outside, the wind shifted again, and in the distance, finally a single hawk cry whistle rang through the cold. Esperanza was coming back, but she wasn't alone. The whistle echoed once, then again, 3 sharp bursts rising and falling through the cold morning air. Santiago was already moving before the last note faded. He grabbed his rifle, nodded to Jonas, and sprinted for the tree line just north of the house. Esperanza's signal, but not the safe signal. Behind him, the house buzzed like a hornet nest waking up. Soledad locked the back door, checked the children again. Nita hadn't moved since the knife. She stood rigid by the fireplace, eyes locked on Tomas, her bloody hands clenched into fists. Soledad moved toward her slowly. Nita, she said. Voice calm, you saved him. That's what matters now. The girl nodded once, but her eyes didn't soften. Not yet. Outside, the woods came alive. Santiago crouched low behind a frozen bush, his breath visible in thick clouds. Across the clearing, Esperanza moved fast, ducking branches, one hand holding a canvas satchel tight to her chest, the other gripping a pistol. She wasn't alone. 2 riders galloped behind her, closing fast. Both carried rifles, both wore Trask's black coats. No badges this time, just blood in their eyes. Jonas raised his rifle beside Santiago. I've got the one on the left. Santiago nodded. On my mark. Esperanza leapt over a fallen tree, hit the ground hard, rolled once and came up firing. The echo of her pistol cracked across the pines. One rider dropped sideways, his horse veering left and crashing into the underbrush. The second ducked low, dodged a bullet, and raised his rifle. Now, Santiago whispered. 2 shots cracked in unison. The second rider jerked back, then toppled from the saddle. The horse kept running. Esperanza didn't stop. She sprinted straight toward them, breathing hard blood at her temple, her braid loose and swinging. Santiago caught her just before she collapsed behind the log. You get it? He asked. She shoved the satchel into his arms. It was where she said, under the altar, sealed tight. Letters, ledgers, claim forms, names, real names. It's all there, Santiago. He opened the satchel just enough to see a stack of weathered envelopes, each marked with dates older than the railroad itself. I got out clean, she said, voice rasping, but I had to circle wide. They knew I was coming back here. How many behind you? At least 6, probably more coming. Jonas whistled low, so we make our stand. Santiago glanced toward the house. No choice now. If they want the truth, they'll have to kill us for it. Back at the house, Chavez took the satchel and began sorting the documents, carefully laying them on the table beside the water stick. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but reverence. This is history. These are testimonies from the original land division. Witnessed, notarized, before the territory was even recognized. Soledad looked over his shoulder. Is it enough to stop Trask? Chavez nodded slowly. More than enough, if we get it into the right hands. Jonas entered behind Santiago and bolted the door. Then we hold until sunrise, he said. By then, I'll have someone get these to the federal judge in Las Vegas. Esperanza wiped blood from her brow. They'll try to burn the house. We'll burn first, Jonas replied. But they won't walk through our smoke. Santiago turned to Nita, who still hadn't spoken. He crouched in front of her. I know you're scared. You should be. But you've done more in 2 days than most men do in a lifetime. She looked at him. If I scream now, will someone listen? He nodded. I will. And I'll make sure the world does too. Nita reached into her coat and pulled out the folded paper her mother had given her before she died. It was cracked, smudged with dirt and blood, but still legible. She handed it to Santiago. She said this was her last truth. He unfolded it. A handwritten letter, addressed to the Territorial Water Authority, signed by her mother and notarized by Father Duval years earlier. It named Caleb Trask directly, alleged coercion threats, and an attempt to falsify claim boundaries. Santiago handed it to Chavez. This seals it. Footsteps outside. Dozens. They were here. Santiago nodded to Jonas, who flipped the table and kicked it in front of the window. They took positions, rifles loaded, traps set. A single lamp flickered on the mantel. Then silence. A voice called from outside. Calm. Commanding. This is your final warning. Bring out the girl and the documents, and we'll let the rest of you walk. Santiago opened the door just enough to shout back. If you want her, come take her. A long pause. Then gunfire erupted. Windows shattered. Walls shook. Dust and glass filled the air. Nita dove under the table, clutching Tomas. Soledad covered them with her body, whispering prayers she hadn't said since she was a girl. Jonas and Santiago returned fire. Esperanza dropped one kneeling near the fence. Leandro, firing from the loft, took out another, circling the barn. They came fast, loud, but not clever. And they didn't expect resistance like this. For 10 long minutes it was thunder and smoke. Then a scream, one of Trask's men, shot in the gut. Then another, and another. Santiago ducked behind the broken frame. They're breaking. Press them. Jonas and Esperanza charged through the back door, sweeping around the side. The rest of Trask's men scattered like deer, too afraid to reload. One tossed his rifle and ran. Then silence. The smoke cleared. 6 bodies on the snow, 2 groaning wounded. The rest gone. Santiago stood in the doorway, rifle across his chest. His face was streaked with blood, not his. His breath came hard. Soledad emerged slowly, Tomas crying soft in her arms. Nita followed, knife still in her hand, but lower now. They're gone, she asked. For now, Santiago said. Esperanza stepped forward, holding up the satchel. But they'll come back with a pen and a judge next time. Chavez walked out with the claim letter and documents in hand. Then we beat them in the only place they respect, court. Jonas looked around at the damage. Let them come. We've got truth on our side now. And Nita, her voice clear and strong, said, I'm done running. Let them try to take what's mine again. I'll bury them in it. Above them, the first light of morning crept over the ridge, washing the blood-stained snow in gold. And for the first time in days, no one moved, no one ran. Because the truth was finally louder than the fear. Snow kept falling long after the shooting stopped. Quiet flakes drifted down like ash, softening the blood-streaked ground around the ranch. The dead stayed where they had fallen, boots, twisted rifles frozen in their hands. Santiago didn't rush to bury them. Not yet. Let the cold keep them honest. Inside the house, Nita sat at the kitchen table, a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. Her hands, scraped and bandaged, clutched a chipped cup of coffee she didn't drink. She stared at the pile of documents laid out beside her birth records, land grants, her mother's final letter. "You think they'll believe all this?" she asked. Chavez looked up from the papers. "They'll have to. These aren't just signatures, they're ghosts. And ghosts don't lie." Jonas paced by the fire, restless. "Belief ain't the problem. Time is. Trask's already halfway to Las Vegas. He'll poison every ear before we even saddle a horse." Santiago stood by the window watching the woods. "We're not chasing him." Esperanza looked up sharply. "You planning to sit here while he rewrites the story?" "No," Santiago said. "We're going to write it first." He turned from the window, jaw set. "Chavez, you and Soledad take the evidence. You ride with Father Duval. Get to Judge Morrow. He's the only one Trask hasn't bought." "That's 3 days," Chavez warned. "On roads Trask already owns." "Then ride smarter than him," Santiago replied. "Not faster, smarter. Take the old canyon trail, through Red Elk Pass." Soledad crossed her arms. "That trail's ice this time of year," good Santiago said. "Trask won't follow you through it." Esperanza pulled her coat tight. "And what about us?" "We stay. Hold the land. If Trask shows up with papers and men, we stall. Give them reason to doubt." "Nita stays with me." "No," Nita said, sudden and loud. Everyone turned to her. "I ride with the documents. It's my name on them. My mother's hand. They won't listen unless I'm there." Soledad approached her gently. "You've already done enough." Nita stood, the blanket slipping off her shoulders. "She didn't die so I could sit behind a punt. She died so I could be heard." Santiago didn't argue. He just looked at her. Saw what he already knew: the child was gone. What stood before him now was something forged, harder, sharper. She had her father's silence, her mother's fire. He nodded once. "Then you ride with Soledad. But you don't leave my sight until you cross the ridge." "You understand me?" Nita met his eyes. "I understand." By noon, the horses were ready, blankets packed, satchels sealed tight with oilskin. Chavez tucked the claim documents into a metal case, wrapped it in flannel, and strapped it to his saddle horn. Nita wore a scarf pulled tight across her face, only her eyes visible beneath the hood. She carried the water stick in her belt. Before mounting, she turned to Tomas, now sleeping in the arms of Esperanza. "I'll come back for you," she whispered. "You wait." He stirred slightly, as if he heard her. Jonas approached Santiago. "You sure about this?" Santiago watched them ride out: the girl, the doctor, the old priest, and the woman who'd once killed a man with a nail file. "No," he said. "But she is." They disappeared into the trees. That night, the ranch was quiet again. Too quiet. Santiago sharpened his blade by lamplight. Esperanza cleaned her rifle with deliberate care. Outside, Jonas set tripwire bells and lanterns that burned low with thick blue flame, the kind that could mark a shadow at 50 feet. "I never thought I'd see this place become a battleground," Esperanza said quietly. "It's always been one," Santiago replied. "Just took longer for the bullets to show up." She paused, hands still. "You ever think about what it'd be like to leave, start fresh? Somewhere nobody knows your name every day," he said. "Right before I decide to stay." She looked over. Why do you? He met her eyes. Because this land remembers, and someone has to remember with it. Hours later, a whistle came from the woods. Not a signal this time. A call. Short. Rushed. Jonas lifted his rifle. Someone's out there. Santiago stepped into the cold coat thrown over his shoulders, lantern held high. He walked 10 yards beyond the porch before he saw him. Micah, the boy from the barn. His face was white eyes, wild jacket torn. You gotta listen, he panted. Trask ain't just heading for the judge, he's bringing a circuit lawyer. Federal. They're stopping at the station near Tularosa, meeting with the land board tomorrow morning. Santiago frowned. He already has a ruling drafted, doesn't he? Micah nodded. They're gonna seize your land by sunrise. Jonas cursed under his breath. How the hell does he move so fast? Micah said. And men who think water flows uphill if you pay it to. Santiago stepped closer. Why are you telling us this? Because I saw the girl, Micah said. She didn't flinch. Not once. She stood in that room like she owned it. And I realized I've never seen someone so small carry something so heavy. Esperanza appeared behind them. Then we intercept the ruling. Santiago turned to her. How Micah swallowed hard. There's a rail spur past the canyon trail. If you ride hard, you'll reach it before they do. Judge Morrow will stop if you stand on that track. Jonas grinned. You planning to stand in front of a train? Valdez Santiago looked at him. No. I'm planning to stop one. Inside Nita's letter still sat on the table. Her mother's handwriting scrawled across it. If anything happens to me, it read, my daughter speaks with my voice. She remembers what I bled to protect. Santiago folded it, tucked it into his coat, and turned to the others. We ride at first light. Esperanza raised an eyebrow. To stop the train, Santiago said. To rewrite history before they do. And from the dark, the wind picked up again, whistling through the trees like a warning. Or maybe a promise. The world was still black when Santiago swung into the saddle. Frost clung to every branch, every fence post, the air sharp with silence. Beside him, Esperanza tightened her scarf and glanced toward the tree line. Jonas mounted behind them, rifle across his back, and nodded once. We'll stop that train, Santiago said. Even if it means standing in front of it. They rode fast. The trail through Red Elk Pass was a tangle of ice and shadow, barely wide enough for the horse to keep footing. Snow had packed hard overnight, and every hoofstep sent a crackle echoing into the trees. But they didn't slow. They couldn't. The documents were on their way to Judge Morrow, yes. But Trask had moved faster than anyone expected. And if he got to the federal lawyer first, truth wouldn't matter. Not when lies came dressed in a suit and carried a seal. Micah rode ahead, guiding them through the old smuggler paths that twisted between narrow gullies and forgotten switchbacks. He spoke little, but his eyes stayed sharp. Santiago found himself watching the boy, trying to read him. Micah had risked everything by coming back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe redemption. But whatever it was, they needed him. By the time the sun cracked over the horizon, they reached the overlook. Below them, the rails cut through the valley like a scar. A telegraph pole buzzed softly in the wind, and far in the distance, the faint whistle of an engine. 15 minutes, maybe less, Jonas said. Esperanza had already dismounted. She pulled out 2 sticks of dynamite from her saddlebag and started walking toward the tracks. Santiago blinked. That wasn't part of the plan. She didn't stop. Neither was murder. But Trask changed the rules. Micah stepped beside her. You blow the tracks, you derail the train. You kill the judge. We're not blowing the whole rail, Esperanza snapped. Just enough to force them to stop. Santiago sighed, dismounted, and followed. You sure you can control the blast? She smirked. I learned from the best. Your father. Together they worked fast, setting the charges just beyond a bend, where the engineer would see the flames in time. Jonas rode down the line to set warning flags. Micah watched the horizon. The whistle grew louder. Then the ground began to hum. Santiago lit the fuse. Boom! Smoke and snow shot into the air. The train's whistle screamed in reply, brakes screeching as steel scraped steel. The engine jerked, slowed, then hissed to a stop 20 yards from the damaged track. The door of the first car opened. 2 men stepped out, one in a crisp gray coat with a gold pin on his lapel, the other in a wide-brimmed hat with a crooked smile. Caleb Trask. Jonas raised his rifle, but didn't aim. Careful, he muttered. This ain't a killing day. Santiago stepped forward, coat open, his father's folded letter in his hand. Judge Morrow, he called. The man in the gray coat stepped down. Who's asking someone with proof of theft, perjury, and attempted murder? Trask laughed. Don't listen to this man, Your Honor. He's a known agitator, a squatter on federal grazing land. Santiago handed over the envelope. Inside, you'll find notarized deeds, land claims, and witness letters, all tied to the Brennan Water Tract, all predating your new client's paperwork by at least a decade. The judge opened the envelope slowly, his brow furrowed. And the girl, he asked. Santiago gestured behind him. Micah stepped forward. She's en route to your office with more documents and the original water stick. She's 10 years old, survived a snowstorm, a manhunt, and the death of her mother. All because this bastard tried to erase her family's name. Trask's face changed. The judge closed the envelope. Mr. Trask, I'll be riding the rest of the way with these men. You'll stay aboard the train until summoned. Trask bristled. You can't, I can. And I just did. Esperanza exhaled her fingers, easing off the trigger she'd kept hidden under her coat. Jonas grinned. Guess this killing day turned into a truth day instead. They rode beside the train the rest of the way to the station. Not in chains, not as fugitives, as witnesses. And in Santiago's chest, something shifted. Not relief, not yet, but a crack in the weight he'd carried for too long. Because for the first time since this began, he believed they might win. And this time they'd win without a single bullet fired. The courthouse in Las Vegas territory was nothing more than a sun-bleached stone building with a crooked roof and an air of indifference. But to Nita, it looked like the last door standing between her and the truth her mother died for. She stood at the bottom of the steps, chin high, coat buttoned to the throat. The satchel was still strapped to her chest, tight as a second skin. Dust clung to her boots. Behind her, Soledad offered a nod of encouragement. Chavez held the final ledger in both hands like scripture. Inside, the air was dry and tense. The judge's bench sat beneath a cracked portrait of President Grant. A single lantern hissed in the far corner. The benches were half filled with townsfolk clerks and a few railroad men pretending not to know each other. But Trask sat front and center, flanked by his lawyer and a man in a gold waistcoat who reeked of Washington politics. When Nita entered, Trask smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just the way a man smiles when he thinks the game is already over. Let the record reflect, the clerk announced, that claimant Nita Brennan has arrived. Judge Morrow glanced up, his eyes tired but sharp. Miss Brennan, I understand you've submitted additional documents. Are you prepared to speak to their contents under oath? Nita nodded. I am. Chavez rose. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'll present the evidence and provide context. But the girl will answer anything the court requires. The judge motioned for him to proceed. Over the next hour, Chavez laid out every detail, the water stick passed down through generations, the letters written by Nita's mother and notarized by Father Duval, the ledger proving the Brennan land claim predated Trask's by over 12 years. Soledad translated when necessary, calm and clear. The courtroom listened, some with doubt, some with dawning recognition. Trask's lawyer objected frequently, calling the documents hearsay, outdated, even fraudulent. But Morrow allowed most of it. He asked questions, took notes, and then he asked Nita to take the stand. She walked up, slowly climbed into the chair that swallowed her small frame, and looked straight at the judge. Do you understand what it means to tell the truth, Miss Brennan? Yes, she said. Even if it costs you. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. It already has. The room stilled. Morrow leaned forward. Tell me why you came all this way. Nita took a breath. Because my mama died trying to protect our land. Because Mr. Trask sent men to scare us to steal it. Because when someone dies for something, it should matter. She paused. We didn't have lawyers or money, just her word. And this. She pulled the water stick from her coat, held it up with both hands. My grandfather carved it. My mama kept it by the door. It tells the truth even when people don't. There was a murmur from the gallery. Someone whispered, She's just a child. But Morrow didn't smile. He nodded slowly. Trask's lawyer stood. This is sentiment, not evidence. This is emotional manipulation. You call it sentiment, Morrow said, but sometimes truth wears tears instead of ink. Trask stood loud. This is outrageous, I demand. You don't demand anything, Morrow snapped. Not in my courtroom. The room fell silent. The judge turned to his clerk. Prepare a stay on any seizure of the Brennan property. I will review all documentation personally and reconvene in 72 hours. Until then, no party may act on land transfers, water claims, or enforcement orders. Trask opened his mouth, but his lawyer grabbed his arm. Nita climbed down from the chair and walked back to Soledad. Outside, the air was warmer. The courthouse doors creaked as they opened. Reporters waited with notepads. Locals watched with cautious interest. Soledad squeezed Nita's hand. You did more than speak. You shook the ground. But Nita's face didn't soften. Not yet. He's not done, she said. I saw it in his eyes. And she was right. Because in a corner of the saloon that night, Caleb Trask lit a cigar and turned to the man beside him. We don't need the land, he said. We just need them off it. The girl, the priest, the whole goddamn story. Burn the ranch if you have to. No one remembers ashes. Back at the ranch, Santiago sat on the porch, staring at the empty trail. Esperanza leaned against the railing beside him. They should have reached the courthouse by now. Santiago nodded. Esperanza lit a cigarette. Think they listened? He didn't answer. He just said quietly, I don't trust judges. I trust what survives them. And somewhere beyond the ridge, smoke had already started to rise. The smoke reached them just before dusk. Jonas spotted it first, a dark column rising over the ridge, curling into the orange sky like a threat whispered in God's ear. He didn't say a word, just pointed. Santiago stood heart tight in his chest and stared for a long moment, before nodding once. Get the horses. They rode fast past the fence lines and dead creek beds across the snow-patched plain, where wind moaned low like it knew what was coming. Esperanza didn't ask questions. She just checked her ammunition and followed. By the time they crested the ridge, the fire was full and furious. The ranch house was ablaze. Flames poured from the roof, devouring everything they had tried to save. The barn doors hung open, smoke choking out of the rafters. Chickens scattered in the distance, and the livestock pens stood eerily empty. But it was the silence that hit hardest. No screaming, no gunshots, no riders in sight. Just the wind and the crackle of burning wood. Santiago dismounted before the horse fully stopped. He ran toward the house, hand over his face, calling out, "Tomas, Soledad." No answer. Jonas grabbed his arm, dragging him back just before the roof collapsed with a thunderous groan. Sparks shot upward like angry stars. "They're gone," he shouted over the roar. "They took them or they ran. But they ain't in there now." Esperanza was already circling the barn, pistol drawn. "Tracks," she called. "Multiple. Headed east. Wagon and horses. No bodies. That means they want something." Santiago turned to her. His voice shook, but not from fear, from fury. "They want to erase it. All of it." Esperanza nodded. "Then we make damn sure they fail." They followed the tracks deep into the woods. Night dropped fast. The moon lit their way only in slivers, but the trail was clear, fresh wagon ruts, hoof prints, broken branches. Santiago rode ahead, every muscle tight. He didn't say a word until they found the first marker, a child's scarf caught on a bramble. Tomas's. Esperanza dismounted and tucked it into her coat. "They're moving fast, but not careful. That's desperation." "Or confidence," Jonas muttered. They caught up just past midnight. A small campfire burned low in a ravine. 4 men sat close to the flames, rifles slung over their shoulders. Soledad was tied to a tree, blood on her forehead, but eyes clear. Tomas lay sleeping in her lap. One of the men poked at the fire with a stick, laughing about something only bastards found funny. Santiago signaled silently. 3 guns, 3 targets. Esperanza would take the left. Jonas, the one by the tree. Santiago would go for the leader. They moved like ghosts. The first man never saw Esperanza coming. Her shot was clean and quiet. Jonas fired next, his man dropping instantly. The third grabbed his rifle but froze when Santiago stepped from the shadows. "Don't," Santiago said. The man hesitated, then dropped it. Soledad looked up. Her voice cracked. "Tomas, he's okay. Just scared." Santiago nodded, kneeling to check the boy. He was warm, breathing steady. Esperanza untied Soledad, helping her stand. "Any others?" "There was a 5th man," she whispered. "Rode ahead with something. Papers, maybe maps. He said Trask was waiting at the canyon station." Jonas cursed. "He's tying up the loose ends. Trying to reroute the land deeds, maybe bribe the rail company." Santiago stood. "Then we end it. Tonight." They left the camp behind. No mercy. No second chances. The fire spread behind them, licking dry brush and bone. As they rode, Soledad rested against Esperanza, weak but determined. They didn't want the land, she said. They wanted the story gone. The family. The names. The memory. Santiago nodded, his voice low. That's what fire is best at. Pretending nothing ever stood. Jonas rode beside him. So what do we do when they try again, when another Trask comes with a bigger match? Santiago didn't blink, didn't look away from the dark horizon. Then we build something that fire can't touch, and behind them the ranch still burned. But ahead the path was clear, toward the canyon station, toward the man who tried to rewrite history. They would meet him before dawn, and this time they wouldn't come to plead. They would come to finish it. Dawn bled slowly over the canyon. The wind rolled in off the cliffs, sharp with dust and pine, and the smoke that still clung faintly to their clothes. Santiago stood with one boot on the canyon rim, watching the sun rise like it might decide the future. Below, the narrow tracks of the old freight line glinted through the mist, curling toward the station like a fuse. He could see the platform now. A single train car, polished too clean for the region, sat idle, and next to it, Caleb Trask. Trask stood with arms folded, flanked by two men in matching gray coats. He didn't look afraid, just tired, annoyed even, like a man who's spent too long pretending he still holds the cards. He brought suits instead of gunmen, Jonas said, riding up beside him. That should tell you something. Esperanza spat into the dirt. Tell me he thinks words can still outgun the truth. Santiago adjusted the rifle on his back. Not today. They rode in without hiding. No more tricks. No more running. Trask saw them coming and didn't move. Only when Santiago dismounted did he speak. You're trespassing on federal property. Santiago smiled faintly. So were you for 20 years. One of the suited men stepped forward. We have documentation stating this land is under review. Until that process concludes, any claim I've got. Documentation too, Jonas cut in. But I left it with someone who can actually read. Esperanza looked past the men to the box Trask had been guarding, a lockbox metal with a single chain. The deeds, she asked. Trask didn't answer. Santiago stepped closer. You tried to burn it all. Though if the ranch was gone, the people would scatter. The girl would disappear. The story would die with the ash. You think the law's on your side now? Trask asked, smirking. Judges come and go. Governments shift. Money stays. That's your mistake, Santiago said, voice steady, thinking we were ever fighting for money. Trask opened his mouth to reply, but then another sound split the morning. Hooves, fast. Down the trail came Nita, riding hard, Chavez and Soledad behind her. She reined in quick, leapt from the saddle, and ran to Santiago with the leather satchel in her arms. We have it, she said breathlessly. Judge Morrow's ruling. He signed it at first light. Full restoration, federal protection, and arrest warrants. Chavez handed over a second envelope. For Mr. Trask. Trask took it slowly, opened it, and read. His face didn't move, but the way his hands tightened told the story. You won't win, he said quietly. Even now. They'll forget. They always do. Santiago looked to Nita, then to Soledad, then to the others gathered. His voice was soft, but it carried. Maybe, but not today. Today they remember. Trask was led away without a fight. The suits didn't protest. There was no shootout. No last stand. Just silence and the soft clink of iron as the cuffs locked shut. And with that, the land exhaled. They stood there a long while, watching the canyon breathe under the new sun. The wind changed. The smoke was gone. Later that week, they buried the water stick at the base of the big sycamore. Nita placed it there herself, wrapped in canvas deep beneath the roots. She didn't cry. She just pressed her hand to the dirt and whispered something no one else could hear. Tomas stood beside her, small hand tucked into hers. I want to build it back, he said. The ranch, like Mama had it. You will, Santiago said. but better. Esperanza handed him a hammer. Weeks passed. Fences were rebuilt. A new roof rose over charred timbers. The community returned slowly like deer after a storm. Some brought nails. Others brought grain. No one brought pity. Chavez opened the school again. Soledad kept records translating land rights for anyone who asked. Jonas took to teaching the kids to shoot reluctantly but seriously. Just in case, he said with a wink. Santiago and Esperanza started a co-op for ranchers too small to fight alone. The papers called it radical. The neighbors called it right. One morning, Nita climbed onto the porch with a bundle of newspapers. Her photo was on the front page, dusty-faced, holding the carved water stick like it was gold. "Does this mean we're famous?" Tomas asked. "No," she said, grinning. "It means they listened." That night the fire pit was lit again. Not for mourning, but for music, for memory. Santiago strummed his father's old guitar while Soledad sang. Esperanza passed a bottle of mezcal. Even Jonas smiled. When the stars were thick and the air cool, Nita sat beside Santiago. "Will it last?" she asked. He looked out at the hills, dark and familiar. "Maybe not forever," he said, "but long enough for you to build something that does." She leaned her head on his shoulder. He let her. And in that moment, surrounded by firelight and breath and hope, the war was over, not because justice had finally been handed down or because one bad man had been cuffed and carried off, but because something sacred had been kept alive. A name, a home, a story. And they had proven once and for all that truth, when carried far enough and fought for hard enough, could survive the fire. Even out here in the rough wind of the West.